Hello, it's Dawn Michelle from Boho Tarot, and today I thought it would be fun to get together and explore all of my mermaid-themed tarot and oracle decks, as well as one bonus ocean-inspired oracle deck in my collection. So this idea was inspired by my recent video on my fairy and fae decks that I did last month, and that really got me thinking about some of the other decks in my collection that have that otherworldly feel. And I've noticed that over the last few months, really, I have collected quite a few mermaid inspired decks, and so I thought I would share those with you today. There are many more mermaid decks out there on the market. These are just the handful that I have in my collection, minus one, which is the Oracle of the Mermaids, which is unfortunate that I don't have that to share with you today, but I actually loaned it to a friend and she is still working with it. It's definitely one that I would encourage you to check out if you haven't seen it. I think the guidebook is lovely, although some of the images are a little bit young and modern for me. I do think the artwork is quite lovely, and the guidebook by Lucy Cavendish is absolutely amazing. So that's also one to kind of keep in mind, but unfortunately I don't have it here to share with you today, and I didn't want to put this whole video on hold just to try to get that deck back in time to actually make a video. So it's just going to be an honorable mention. Definitely a mermaid deck I would suggest checking out if you haven't seen it yet. But for now, let's go ahead and take a look at the decks that I do actually have in my possession as well as in my collection. So I thought for this video, because I really don't have that many mermaid or ocean themed decks, I would kind of go in chronological order. Now this is actually the first deck, like ever, tarot, oracle, anything that I had seen in real life. This was the first deck that I ever had a reading done for me with, and it was done by a friend of mine 20 plus years ago. This is the Magical Mermaids and Dolphins. Of course, this is the Doreen Virtue version. I do believe this is still available. I had it at one time, it went missing, and I repurchased it, I want to say about a year ago. So this is a fairly newer edition. But this is the first time I ever had any experience with a reading was with this deck. This was the deck that my friend had and that she used, and she thought starting out with an oracle before we dove into tarot was a good introduction, which I totally agree with. So the artwork is totally varied because it is all artwork by different artists. So it's completely curated art. The titles and keywords were placed over the top of it. Now, occasionally, as per usual with Doreen Virtue decks, sometimes they're a little specific for me. Like here's a good example: self-employment, you're a born entrepreneur and your business is surrounded by magical opportunities. That is super specific, and for me that doesn't really work for an oracle card because it's too specific, right? That couldn't really apply to, say, questions about maybe spirituality or health or relationships. That feels very much ingrained in business readings. And so there are a couple cards like that that kind of miss the mark a little bit for me, but overall I do actually really like this deck. So here we have wait, don't rush into action right now, bide your time for better results. I do find that the keywords and the messages on most of these cards are quite good. We do have some references to the Christian God. If that kind of connotation bothers you, you might want to kind of in your mind change the word. Whenever I see that word, I just think of source or deity or divine. And so I just kind of swap them in my head. So here we have self-forgiveness, let go of old guilt, and remember that you're God's perfect child. I think of that as divinity's perfect child. So you can see here that the artwork is quite different. Some of it is quite beautiful and some of it is, let's be honest, a little cheesy, but it's just a really wonderful kind of well-balanced and reassuring affirmation deck. And I would definitely call this an affirmation deck because for the most part, all of the messages are very nurturing and reassuring, and they have a positive spin on them, which is totally, in line with Doreen Virtue decks. So I do find that it is actually a really wonderful little reader. And because we don't have a ton of decks to go over today, I'll just quickly flip through some of these oracles. We'll see about the tarots because there's more cards in those. But I'll quickly flip through these oracles just so you can see them in case these aren't cards that you have seen before. I do like this one, like yes. I love a yes card. It's just like this message from the universe saying, go for it. I think that's pretty great. We do have some other magical creatures mixed in with these decks as well. We have some unicorns. And of course, this one is the mermaids and dolphins. So we have dolphin cards as well, which I quite love because I love sea life. And dolphins in particular, dolphins and whales. And sometimes I don't pay as much attention to the messages as the keywords, and sometimes it's the other way around, just depending on what we're looking at. So like for alchemy, that I think is a fantastic keyword. This phrase down here, you have the Midas touch right now, and every project you begin turns to gold. Again, that's super specific, so I would tend to ignore that and just focus on the keyword of alchemy. For most of these cards, I focus more on the keywords and the imagery than the key phrase down at the bottom or the oracle message down at the bottom, but that's just me personally. This is one of my favorite cards because it has an orca in it, which I love. So yeah, it's actually a wonderful little deck. It's kind of a surprise little deck. Again, for me, it's like a nostalgia deck in my collection because this is the first deck that I ever had any interaction with. As I said, it's the first deck that I ever received a reading with. And so I will probably always have it in my collection if for nothing else than to just keep it for nostalgia's sake. But I do actually find that I read with it. This is one that I actually take to the beach with me a lot. So when we go to the beach for family vacations, this is one that I definitely end up taking along a lot of the times. It does have a nice little guidebook, you know, and it's full of your kind of typical Doreen Virtue messages in it. As you can see, like I haven't really used it. It's pretty much brand new. So it's definitely not something that I get into. I just use the keywords and the artwork mainly, and sometimes the phrases down at the bottom. But it is a nice, solid little reader that I do quite enjoy working with, and I particularly enjoy working with it when we are at the beach. And here's what the backs look like. So lovely little deck. I really do quite like it, even though, yes, it is a Doreen Virtue deck, and yes, it is definitely an affirmation style deck, but I find it to be a wonderful message to a tarot reading, or just using it as one card draws when I'm on vacation at the ocean. So the next mermaid deck that I purchased and that I've had for quite a while and is one of my absolute favorites in my collection, if I'm just going to be perfectly honest with you, this is the Dame Darcy Mermaid Tarot, and I forget which edition this one is. This is from 2018. Has the gorgeous magnetic top box and the beautiful matte cardstock with the gilding on the side, which again, matte gilding, which I do really love. This deck is the first mermaid deck that I bought, beautiful backs, that I completely fell in love with. This is the deck that really opened me up to the idea of working with mermaid decks. However, it's the only mermaid deck besides the Doreen Virtue one that I had for quite some time because I felt like I had this deck, and so I don't need another one. This is the only mermaid deck that I will need in my collection forever and ever. And that was kind of how I felt about it. And there is still a little part of me that definitely feels that way about this deck, that there's something special about this deck. I have a special spot in my heart for this deck. And I've had some really wonderful experiences reading with it. It's kind of a fun, playful deck for me, and I'm going to do a deeper dive into this deck, so we'll be able to take a look at that and talk more about my experiences working with this deck in particular. But it is definitely one of my favorite decks in my collection, and it's also the kind of one mermaid deck that really just is like, if I were to have a soul mermaid deck, it would be this one. And I still feel that way about it today, even though I have other mermaid decks in my collection now, another Mermaid Tarot as well. Although you'll see in this collection, I actually only have 2 Mermaid Tarot decks. I don't think there's a ton of actual Mermaid Tarot out there. It's more Mermaid Oracle decks than anything. But this for me just holds a really special place in my heart, and it's definitely one that I enjoy reading with. I tend to use it a lot during the summer, and it's just such a fun read. Again, I'll talk more about this deck when we do our deep dive into it here later this month. But as far as being the kind of one mermaid deck that like is my kind of soul mermaid deck, it is definitely this one. It's the favorite in my collection. Out of all my mermaid decks, it's still my favorite. And it actually ranks up there pretty high with just among favorite decks in general as well, which is always quite fun. So again, that is the Dame Darcy Mermaid Tarot. So the next deck that I purchased that had mermaids in it is this Mermaids and Dolphin Oracle deck by Jillian Kemp. I do believe that this is quite an older deck. I'll have to look and see maybe at the guidebook. I haven't made a bag for this yet because I'm a little bit iffy on this deck, to be perfectly honest. It has this weird, one of these weird open boxes. It's by Mindfulness, etc. And the cards like really don't sit in there very well because it's got that weird thing going on. But I need to make a bag for it. And part of the reason I haven't made a bag for it yet is because I might end up trimming it down a little bit. But this deck it's interesting. So it is a Mermaid and Dolphin Oracle, and because this is not a deck that I would probably do like a full video on or flip through on its own, I'll just give you a little bit of a look at it. The guidebook is actually quite nice. Talks a little bit about mermaids, a little bit about dolphin lore, which is quite wonderful. I love that we have that in here as well. That is something that is missing from, I think, a lot of the kind of mermaid and dolphin type of decks, that there's not a lot about the dolphins. It's more focused on the mermaid. We have kind of how to lay the cards here, which gives you some different readings. This is a really nice little guidebook, actually. Like, there's actually a lot of readings in here. Like quite a few. So here we go into the cards, and there is kind of a structure to this deck, which I find really interesting. So we have the rulers of the ocean cards. Okay, so we have the rulers, which are the archetypal energies and kind of the mermaids. And then we have the whales and dolphins, which is quite lovely. So there is a kind of suit for them as well. So that was one of the things that I really liked about this deck, is that it did actually have kind of like a suit of dolphins. So we kind of have a suit of mermaids and a suit of dolphins, so to speak, which is quite wonderful. And it is a nice little guidebook. I do enjoy looking through it. So taking a look, here's the backs, which, you know, are nice. They're actually reversible, even though it's an oracle deck. I don't think that's necessarily needed, but nice to know if you do read reversals. The design on the cards is really not my favorite. In fact, the artwork is really not my favorite. But I do really like the cards that are included. So here we have King Poseidon, we have Queen Amphitrite, I probably said that wrong, and each card, as you'll notice, does have a sort of message that goes along with it. So this one says, faith is an optimist that shows which way you flow. We have the Triton, your aim rather than your desire is your real doctrine. So I do quite like the energies and the messages that are included in this deck. It's just kind of the design of it that doesn't really thrill me, but I might try to do something with that. So here we have the Merman, the Nixie, the Merbaby, the Water Nymph, the Sith Mermaid, the Mermaid's Purse, the Rowan Mermaid, the Undine, Oceanus, Lorelei, the Siren, we have the 3 Rhine mermaids. So you can see we have a lot of different mermaid energies here. We have the Kelpie, the Mermaid's Rock, the Nyx, the Mermaid's Glove. So it's an interesting setup where we have, where did we get to? 26 cards that are mermaids. And you can see they actually even have a different design on the cards, which is quite cool. It's kind of like a 2-in-1 deck. We have our mermaids here, and then we have our whales and dolphins. So we have the sperm whale, the porpoise, the bottlenose dolphin, the striped dolphin, the humpback whale, the gray whale. I do like that we have whales and dolphins in this deck because I love both. The beluga. This is the one card that kind of gets me. The killer whale, that's not really what they're called, right? They're orcas. That is their species name. And I do not like when cards use the killer whale because that is like a nickname that humans have adopted for this particular species. I'm really particular about orca stuff. And so this card kind of gets me because I prefer when they use orca. And again, the kind of artwork on it is a little bit like the dorsal fin isn't correct. These fins aren't in the right spot. The eye's not in the right spot. Like I'm kind of particular about that kind of stuff. So this card kind of gets me, but at least it's included. So at least the orca is included, which is a very particular energy for me and has been for a very long time. So I'm real particular about my orca cards and I'm super fussy about them. This one kind of misses the mark on all kinds of ways, but at least it's here. So I'm okay with that. So we have the narwhal, the pilot whale, and then we have the sea monster, the kraken. So we have kind of mythological creatures as well, the sea serpent. Then we're back to whales, the blue whale, the right whale, the common dolphin. Again, kind of mythological creatures with the Proteus, the old man of the sea. Oops, missed a card. We have the spotted dolphin, the black dolphin, the hourglass, more mythological creatures. Here we have Sedna, which is nice. I like seeing that in there. The water leaper. And so it's an interesting deck. You can definitely see when you're looking at it, the different cards. So we have our mermaids and our dolphins and whales, which I do quite like. So it's an interesting deck and one that as you can tell, I really haven't done any work with because it's still in order. But I think that's mostly just because I think I want to do something to it in terms of maybe doing some modifications to it or something. I just feel like because the design and the artwork doesn't quite resonate with me, but the energies in the deck do, that I really do kind of want to do something with it to help it connect a little bit better for me. So again, that one is the Mermaids and Dolphin Oracle. As soon as I get it, like, I don't know, modified or something, I will be creating a bag for it because this box is ridiculous. I don't know whoever thought that this box design was a good idea, but it's really not. It is ridiculous to try and get things in and out of here and to keep things from getting crunched as well. I mean, it looks cute on a shelf, but using it is ridiculous. So anyway, that is the Mermaids and Dolphins and Magical Creatures of the Sea Oracle. So the next deck that I got in is the Mermaid Tarot, and this is the newer Mermaid deck by Lisa Robertson, illustrated by Julie Dillon, and available from Llewellyn. This one we just recently did a full walkthrough of, so I won't go into too much detail about it. I'll leave that linked in the description box if you want to check that out. This is a mermaid deck that I kind of had on my wish list for a really long time because it is absolutely stunning. The artwork is absolutely beautiful, and I am actually quite impressed with the guidebook and the setup and the structure and the write-up for this deck as well. I go through all of that in the walkthrough, of course. If you missed that, you can check that out there. The only reason I had this deck kind of on hold, like right on the back burner, that I wasn't going to get it, is because I have my Dame Darcy Mermaid Tarot, and I was like, I don't need another mermaid deck. But this deck has a very different energy and a very different feel than my Dame Darcy Mermaid. This one, despite the fact that I've heard a lot of people refer to it as the Little Mermaid deck, I could totally see that. There are definitely some cards in here that give me Little Mermaid vibes. Like this is a good one, right? But I find that this deck, despite its kind of cartoony nature, and I don't mean that in any sort of a disrespectful way because I do think this artwork is quite beautiful, but it is a little bit more kind of Disney-fied, so to speak, than something like the Dame Darcy Mermaid Tarot, which is more comic book style. This would be more cartoon style, and I'm sure there is like a proper name for this art style. I don't know what it is, so forgive me for that. That's just kind of my way that I kind of classify it. This is kind of a little bit more cartoony. The Mermaid Tarot by Dame Darcy is a little bit more comic book style. But despite the fact that we have some cards here that do have, like, here's a good one, that have a little bit of a Little Mermaid vibe to it, right? This card does remind me of Ariel being in her, like, treasure trove with all her who's its and what's its galore. You know, you want thingamabobs, she's got 20. I could recite the whole thing. That's how often we've seen it, because Ash went through a Little Mermaid phase. It was right about the time that we went to Disneyland and Ash got to meet Ariel, meet Ariel. And then it was a whole Little Mermaid thing. So Little Mermaid played in our house all the time. So I could probably recite the whole movie to you word for word. But despite the fact that there are a few cards in here that do give me Little Mermaid vibes, I actually find this deck to be quite grown up, for lack of a better term. It's a lot more serious than I really thought it was going to be. It's not so much a kind of fun and playful type of deck as my Dame Darcy is actually more of a fun and playful type of deck for me, but it's more mature fun, right? It's not so much about exploring on a surface level, but diving deep. And that's not to mean that the Dame Darcy can't go deep, because it definitely does. But for me, it has a much more lighthearted, fun, kind of flirty type of energy, where the Mermaid Tarot feels a little bit more serious in contrast to the Dame Darcy Mermaid. And that's just kind of how here's that's the quintessential Little Mermaid card, right? If she had red hair, that would be Ariel and Eric. I actually do really like the Little Mermaid type cards in this deck because it makes me think of that time. And it does kind of pull me not only back to that time when my kids were little, but also back to my own childhood, because I watched Little Mermaid a lot as a kid, and I loved it, and it was a favorite of mine too. So when my kids started watching it, or Ash in particular started watching it, I was thrilled, because I do like the Little Mermaid, and I grew up with Ariel as well, and so that was pretty wonderful. But I do find that this deck has a much more serious energy than I thought it was going to. So anyway, that is not the newest, but the newest Mermaid Tarot in my collection, and this one was sent to me from Llewellyn. And so I'm really thrilled to be able to have it in my collection now. It does have a big, beautiful guidebook in here, which I'm not going to take out because I need to make a bag for it. So that is the Llewellyn Mermaid Tarot, which is, again, a deck that I now quite adore. So the last mermaid deck, or the most recent mermaid deck that I purchased, is the Messages from the Mermaid, and we are going to be doing a full walkthrough of this deck here on my channel shortly, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about it here. But this deck I basically purchased because I wanted to pair it with the Mermaid Tarot from Llewellyn that we just saw. That's the whole reason I got this deck, because I've seen it paired on other people's channels and it looks beautiful, and they go together absolutely wonderfully. It is a beautifully diverse deck, which again pairs really well with the Mermaid Tarot, which is also a really nice diverse deck. And I do quite like the images in this deck. I'll talk a little bit more about my kind of first impressions with it in the walkthrough that we're going to do. Or actually, at this point, I've actually already done it, but it's not coming out for till next week. But it's the magic of editing. Anyway, I'll talk a little bit more about that during that video. But it's just a stunning mermaid deck. This is stunning mermaid artwork. I do, for the most part, like most of the keywords. There are a few that are a miss for me, but there's no such thing as a perfect deck. And this artwork is absolutely amazing. This is a deck of curated artwork. So the artist, Linda Olson, all of these images are available to check out on her website, along with a plethora more of them. So if you enjoy her artwork, I definitely encourage you to go look up her website and check out her other offerings. She does do other things other than mermaids as well, but her art is quite lovely, and she has quite a selection of beautiful art to enjoy on her website. So I definitely encourage you to check that out. But again, that is a deck that I bought specifically to pair with the Mermaid Tarot. And it's definitely one that I'm looking forward to getting to know better and to working with a little bit more. It's definitely a deck that I feel like is just kind of like, it's a pairing deck, right? I have certain Oracle decks in my collection that I don't really use on their own. I just use them with tarot. And this is kind of one of those decks that I feel like I would just use it with tarot. I don't know that I would really pull from it any other time, or as a deck like this, the Magical Mermaids and Dolphins. This I do use on its own sometimes. And I think part of that is because the messages are actually on the cards in this deck, whereas in this deck we just have the keywords. And so that means if I want to dive deeper into the messages from the author, I have to actually get out the guidebook, and that's just not always something that I want to do. So those are my mermaid oracles. Right, and then we have this mermaid and dolphin one, which I'm not really sure what I'm gonna do with at this point. These have almost the same name. This does have more cards, and this does have many more dolphin cards if that's something that you're interested in. Again, the artwork's not really my favorite on this, but I might do something with it. So that'll be interesting, because I do really like the structure, and I really like the setup and the cards that are included and the energy. It's just the design of it. It's not my favorite, but of these three oracles, right, this one's just the most beautiful out of all of them. Again, I really like the structure on the mermaids and dolphins, and I really just have kind of a personal soft spot for this Doreen Virtue mermaids and dolphins because of my past history with it. And I do think it's actually quite a nice, beautiful reader, and it often goes to the beach with me. So there's that connection as well, because that is one of my favorite places to be, is on the Oregon coast. And whenever we go, this deck goes along with us. So now we're going to take a look at one bonus deck, which is an ocean themed oracle. And I have taken it out of its box. It does have a nice, deck size box with a deck size guidebook, but I find that I really don't dive into the guidebook much, and you'll see right here in a minute. So I made a bag for it so that it stands up in my little bin. This is the Whispers from the Ocean, I think. I love the little turtles on the back. And this is an absolutely stunning ocean-inspired oracle. So, of course, it's not mermaids. I don't even think there's a single mermaid in this deck, because this is all real animals. I do believe. Watch there be some magical creature in here, and I've just forgotten. But this is one of my favorite oracle decks because it is, for one, just absolutely beautiful. But I do really like the key phrases that we have, the keywords and the key phrases on the cards. I find that there is like just the right amount of information here that I don't necessarily need to go to the guidebook if I don't want to. And this is one of those oracle decks that, while it pairs really beautifully with my tarot decks, it's also one that I will pull just one card readings from as well, or just pull a card for the day, or a card for the energy to tap into, because it works really beautifully for that. I don't think I've done a full, like, proper walkthrough of this deck either. So we'll just real quick flip through all the cards in case you haven't seen it before. It's absolutely stunning. The artwork is just beautiful. Unfortunately, I don't have the guidebook to tell you who the artist is. That wasn't very smart of me. I'll try to remember to maybe link it in the description box. There are quite a few whale cards in this deck, and if you've watched some of my other videos where I've talked about whale energy, or anytime there's a deck with a whale card in it, I'm all about it. Like, if I find a deck with a whale card in it, I will buy it just because it has one whale card in it. One of these days I'm gonna make like a full-on whale dolphin deck, if for nothing else, just for my own use, because I absolutely love whale energy. It's something that I connect with very deeply. And in particular, orca. Technically, orca's a dolphin, but whale, dolphins, they're all the same. Anyway, like this is an amazing card. Look at this octopus. This is blend into the environment. You have many skills that can fit into any situation. Take time to assess what is going on around you and adapt accordingly. I just think that's beautiful. Here we have some dolphins, and there's an orca. I mean, I just, I'd have bought it just for that. So just an absolutely beautiful deck. Here's another whale card. As I said, there's multiple whale cards in here. I absolutely love this one as well. As well. I do think that this is probably my favorite one. As much as I love orcas, you know how attached I am to them, I think that this is my favorite whale card because just look at his big beautiful eyes. It says look beyond the surface. I mean, that's just stunning. This has that really wonderful matte cardstock. I want to say it's Blue Angel, but I could be wrong because again, I've not gotten rid of the box. The box is in storage, but I don't have the box or guidebook to reference it. Some more dolphins. I do really like this one too. Not one, but 2 orca cards. That makes me so happy. Makes me so happy when I come across one of those. I do really like this card as well. That one's quite beautiful. The little clownfish. Just, yeah, a stunning deck. Okay, I'm gonna just try to flip through it pretty quickly just in case, you know, you haven't seen it. You'll get a chance to at least take a quick peek at all these beautiful cards. I love this one looking at the underbelly. It's beautiful. And the sharks, I quite love sharks as well. I love this one too, where the mother's pushing the baby to the surface. That's another gorgeous card. Whales, look at all the whales. That makes me so happy. Okay, so that's a look at the Whispers of the Ocean Oracle. Again, not mermaids, but it is ocean, and it is really the only full-on ocean deck that I have in my collection. At this point, and at the time I'm filming this, I'm currently waiting for the Healing Waters. Oh, I forget. The deck that I backed on Kickstarter that is ocean energy, and there are mermaids and sea creatures and mythical creatures in that one as well. And that one is a full-on ocean themed tarot deck, which I am quite excited to get. Hopefully it should be here before too long. In the meantime, I do have this beautiful oracle deck. So that is a beautiful ocean deck, the only true ocean oracle I really have in my deck collection. That is the Whispers from the Ocean. I do believe that is the name of it. I will have a link for you in the description box below, of course. So that is just a look at all of the mermaid, dolphin, but mermaid decks in my collection that, well, I currently have in my possession, minus the one Oracle of the Mermaids by Lucy Cavendish, which again, I have lent to a friend, so I don't have it here to share with you today, but I will definitely leave a link for it if you want to check it out. We have my 2 Mermaid Tarot decks that I do quite love. We have the new Mermaid Tarot by Llewellyn that has recently come into my collection that I'm really enjoying working with. My all-time favorite mermaid deck, the Dame Darcy Mermaid Tarot, my Magical Mermaids and Dolphins, which has a little bit of a nostalgia feel for me, a little bit taking back to when I was first introduced to cards as a whole. Then we have the Mermaids and Dolphins and Magical Sea Creatures. I'm not sure if that's part of the title or if it's just the additional text on the box, but we do have that one, which again, I'm still trying to figure out where it fits in my collection, but I do love the structure of the deck. And then we have the new Messages from the Mermaids, which is the newer Hay House Mermaid Oracle deck. I think I've got a pretty good selection of mermaid decks here. I feel like I've got, you know, kind of the bases covered. And then of course I have my bonus oracle that is just full on ocean energy with the Whispers of the Ocean. I do hope that's the name of it because I don't have the box to look at. So I would love to know what mermaid decks you have in your collection. Are there any that I don't have here that you really think that I need to check out? Please feel free to share with me in the comments below. I would love to know what your suggestions are, what your thoughts are on any of these decks, or do you even work with mermaid energy? Are those decks that you like to have in your collection, or is it something that you haven't just quite gotten on board with yet? So please feel free to share with me in the comments below. In the meantime, thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you again soon for more creative tarot for an inspired life.